Leinster and La Rochelle, club rugby's greatest rivalry? Well, that's up for debate for sure. And what's up for debate as well is who will come out on top this weekend as Leinster and La Rochelle meet for the fourth consecutive knockout stage in a row. This will be the fifth time they've met each other in 4 years. If you remember the group game we had earlier on this season in the pouring rain. So yes, another meeting between these two titans of sides. La Rochelle have got Leinster's number in the knockout stages, winning all those matches. 2021 in the semi-final, and then back-to-back finals, and most memorably last year in the Aviva Stadium. Rowan O'Gara's side will travel to the Aviva Stadium this weekend once again to take on Leinster. This time it is the quarterfinals. So who will come out on top in what should be an epic match? Well, stay tuned as we have a deep dive into the match. So let's start way back when in 2021, Rowan O'Gara at the helm of La Rochelle, hoping to get the side that had come from Pro D2 in 2015-16 and started developing a taste for European rugby. Rowan O'Gara took charge and got them all the way to the final. And on their way to the final loss to Toulouse at Twickenham in 2021, they took on Leinster. And we saw the likes of Lavani Bottia in the centres back then, destroying it, tearing it up, as La Rochelle's physicality dominated Leinster. And that was the start of the trend of where La Rochelle have got their success from in recent years. So in 2021, it was a 32-23 victory for La Rochelle. Greg Aldred, Will Skelton did the tries for the hosts in what was an empty stadium. Unfortunately, of course, COVID meant that no fans were able to go during much of the campaign. But it was a game where Leinster led for a majority of the match. Ross Byrne playing that day, kicking a lot of the penalties. And they led for a while. Try from Tide Furlong extended their lead, but it always felt like La Rochelle were dominating the breakdown. They won 7 turnovers that day. And eventually, Leinster's attack stopped and they couldn't get through the La Rochelle defence. And La Rochelle, the French side, powered their way over, started to use the attack and bullied them up front as they claimed a memorable victory that day. So you think first game, maybe the home crowd, well not the home crowd, but the home atmosphere, COVID era, La Rochelle get the win. How will they fare the year later? Well, once again, La Rochelle dominated the Irish side up front physically. And it was a game where Leinster led for the majority of the game again in the final in Marseille. Sexton kicking a lot of penalties, Ross Byrne getting on the act as well. But then Leinster never found a way to get past the defence. La Rochelle had 61% possession that day. 61% possession in a final. And you thought Leinster might just hold on here. Tries came from Raymond Rule, Bougarit, but Leinster led 21 points to 17 heading into the final stages. And you thought, if Leinster can hold on here, they will deserve to be champions. But if La Rochelle score, then they will deserve to be champions. It was such an epic game in Marseille. And La Rochelle were banging on the door. But the Irish defence was holding up. They'd held up for a lot of the match, making so many tackles. And Leinster, they might look back on it and go, could they have conceded early to give them a chance? Because La Rochelle were on the line for 5 minutes, it felt like. And eventually they did get the try. La Rochelle, Retier getting the try. And it was kind of too little too late because the try happened with less than 90 seconds left on the clock, which meant Leinster had no time to take the kick-off as La Rochelle's conversion went over. Ihar West, as the fly-half was then, getting the extras. La Rochelle win the Champions Cup and they defy the odds. But you thought that was defying the odds. Let's fast forward 12 months and look back 12 months where we are now for the 2023 Champions Cup final. Oh, what a game it was. I'm sure you all remember Leinster, the home crowd, the Aviva Stadium, had basically played 4 games in a row because they played the final group game last year in the 2022-23 campaign at the Aviva. Then they played Ulster, Leicester and Toulouse, all at the Aviva, and then the final was already going to be in Dublin. But Leinster then confirmed, obviously, beating Toulouse on their way to the final, which meant it was going to be a home final, as per se. And it pretty much was. I'd say 75% of that crowd the day were the Leinster fans waving the blue flags, but there were patches of La Rochelle fans. But they were kept pretty quiet early on. The multi-phase attack, which Leinster had struggled in the 2 previous encounters, finally came to a shore. But they used the line-up well to start with. Dan Sheehan and Jack Conan linking up well in the opening minutes of the game to score an absolute sensational try. Then they go again. Jimmy O'Brien, multi-phase attack, out wide, scores. Leinster just getting over and over the gain line. La Rochelle's breakdown and defensive work that had been so strong in the previous encounters of much of Ronan O'Gara's reign was not there. Leinster then go again. Dan Sheehan, 19-0. And I'm speaking quite faster, but that's how it happened in the game. 10 minutes in, Leinster 19-0 up. You think, that's it. They're gonna be champions. But then everyone took a breath. Did they start too early that game? La Rochelle hit back and they just increased the physicality. And they just started to play a bit more rugby, started to get more possession, which they had done in the previous encounters. And we saw a theme again. Jonathan Dunty, Soutini getting the 2 tries, Soutini right before half-time, which felt like a bit of a swing in the game as Leinster 23-7 up, but Soutini getting a try, closes the gap to 23-14. And for much of the second half, Leinster could not get through the defence and La Rochelle dominated possession, eventually getting the winning tries. The 2 is Byrne and Hastoy traded penalties back and forth, but it always felt like La Rochelle for the last 20-25 minutes were dominating. If you take from 55 to potentially 70 minutes, that La Rochelle were all over the Leinster side, and the driving wall was very successful that day. And then they get the driving wall penalties, Leinster get man to the bin, but they scored this time with 5-6 minutes left. Colombe getting the try, but Leinster came back at them in the final phases. And you're thinking, Leinster had nothing here, but they started to get momentum. La Rochelle, bit of ill discipline creeping back to the sides as Leinster increased the intensity, and they got to 5 metres short. Then they lost the ball. La Rochelle kick away. Donty, I think it was, who whacked the ball down, and James Lowe caught it, ran straight back at the La Rochelle defence. And then they're going to score. Surely they're going to score here. Just like La Rochelle had done the year before. It's going to be a last-minute try. 2 teams back and forth, and it's basically the last try before the final full-time whistle wins it. But no, Alawatoa cleans out one of the La Rochelle players, gets a red card. La Rochelle won a penalty, and that is effectively that. So what we've learned is that you basically, as any rugby game, got to be in the lead with, let's say, the last play of the game. You've got to be in the lead there. But I think it's more important about having the ball, because I think if Alawatoa doesn't get that red card, Leinster probably 95% sure they're going to win that game. They're going to score a try, the home crowd goes wild, Leinster win the Heineken Cup in a home venue. What a game. But they didn't. But the 2 previous finals have come down to who has the possession at the last play of the game. La Rochelle scored, 80 minutes on the clock, they win. Leinster has scored that day, they would have scored with 30 seconds left, kick goes over, Leinster win. So it is interesting to see that these games come down to such small margins. And there's always been a score or a potential score in the last play of the game, because in 2023, in the group game this year in the pouring rain, it was Kieran Frawley's last-minute penalty that eventually ended the game, because these games are always so close. But what's interesting this time round is that Leinster have shown they can step up the physicality against Ronan O'Gara's mighty La Rochelle. Because in the group game, Joe McCarthy was their hero at lock. Just stepped up the intensity. James Ryan, who is a doubt for Saturday's game, but even still, those who really stepped up, and we saw a different side of Leinster. And actually, it was sort of a reverse of the previous games where Leinster's attack has been going but never really getting there, and finding the line breaks but never trying to find the try, and La Rochelle's defence keeping them strong and finding a way to win. That's what Leinster did in the group game. They found a way to win despite La Rochelle. I think they beat 27 defenders that day in the pouring rain in the Stade Marcel de Flandre, the full packed out crowd. But they didn't score a try, and it was Jordan Lama's try in the corner that got Leinster the lead, and they just eventually held it. and they kept pushing for those tries at the end. They kept getting so close, but Leinster held on. I think they held up a couple of mauls, got very close, and it felt like that was a key moment in Leinster's season. And I don't think either side have been particularly good so far in the Champions Cup, it's fair to say. Leinster, I think, haven't been tested that much. I think last week's game, Leinster was scrappy, but then they scored 5 tries off pretty much first phase attacks. And it was hard to really see where they were in the 22 because they were just scoring off a first phase. You couldn't really see them get to play with ball in hand and see their multi-phase attack because they were scoring so quickly. But when they didn't score those tries, they looked scrappy and kind of made silly decisions. La Rochelle go down again away in Stormers last week, 15-17-0, and they found a way to win. Is that the recipe for La Rochelle? Finding a way to win. Leinster have done it in recent games between the two sides, particularly in the only one they've won was in 2023. And they found a way to win despite going behind very early on. That's what La Rochelle's recipe is. And Leinster's was just hanging on. And I think it really comes down to, can you be more than 7 points ahead in the final 5 minutes? And I think if you are, you win the game. I mean, that makes sense. Surely it makes sense, it's rugby. But we just have a look at those 2 previous finals where it looked like Leinster were going to win and find a way, and they didn't. And the same last year where La Rochelle looked like they scored a try, but they scored it too early, and then pretty much Leinster would have scored. So it's just an interesting debate to see how much of a lead can you get, but when it comes to the final 15 minutes, the type of lead and how much you do lead by could be crucial. I think 10-point lead going to the final 10 minutes could be crucial for either side, but I don't think it will happen in Dublin this time. I think it's going to be such a close game, and I can't call it. I think Leinster's win in La Rochelle is very big for mentality. I think regardless, they would have never known they were going to face each other in the quarterfinals again, but there was a likelihood they would have done, being in the same group and sort of being at different seeds. There was a likelihood that these two sides would have faced each other down the line, whether it be the finals, semis, quarters, and it's the quarters this time round. So that is a huge win for Leinster, knowing they can beat La Rochelle's side. I mean, La Rochelle weren't great that day, neither were Leinster. It was pouring with rain, we'll let them off. But La Rochelle have done it before in three knockout games, 2 finals, 1 in semi-final in COVID. They just know how to beat this Leinster side, and the opportunity is enormous. I wasn't going to do the accent there. I kind of bottled the accent there a little bit. The French-Irish accent that Rona Gara says, but the opportunity is enormous for La Rochelle. If they go again to Dublin, get another victory, back-to-back wins in Dublin, they'll be favourites for the title for me. And I think if Leinster win, they're not favourites for the title because they've still got Toulouse on the other side of the draw, potentially Bordeaux, whatever happens that side. But if La Rochelle go and beat Dublin, or go and beat Leinster in Dublin again, it'll be a crushing blow for this Leinster side because it'll just be another home game they've lost. And I think it comes down to whether Leinster's physical players step up and whether they're accurate enough. I think if their physicality is good, with Joe McCarthy is basically their key player for me, and James Ryan, get the line up, get the physicality assured, try and stem the breakdown, push Bottier away from the breakdown, because Bottier this year has got 8 turnovers, Greg Aldrich 5 turnovers. And it's just, if La Rochelle can get the breakdown over, then Leinster have lost. But for me, Leinster just have to be good in the breakdown, good in physicality side, and that's where I think they'll find the victory. And I think Leinster will edge it. I think they've learnt from previous years how to beat them. And Jacques Nienaber, the South African coach, kind of one of the understated coaches in world rugby, the tactical masterclass. I think Leinster's performance last week was good enough to get them through, but I think the coaches Leo Cullen and Nienaber will be ready to go at it. And I think that will help Leinster get the victory this time round, because they're not favourites this time. The bookies have made them 8-point favourites, but everyone knows they won't be favourites. Last year, they deserve to be favourites, and they looked pretty good for it. 10 minutes in, 19-0 up. But this time around, I don't think they'll get an early lead. But I think not being favourites will help them, but the home pressure will make it closer than it should be, which is weird to say in front of a home crowd. You think that will give them a 10-point advantage. I think the home pressure makes it worse for them. I think in front of Aviva, they don't lose very often then. And they've only lost 2 knockout games in the Aviva Stadium in Leinster's history. One against Saracens in COVID, and then last year. We're going round in circles here, so let's cut to the chase. If Leinster show physicality in the line-out and the breakdown, and keep their multi-phase attack for long periods of time, and not just in the opening 10 minutes, Leinster win. But if La Rochelle stop Leinster's multi-phase, make it a scrappy game, and dig it out, and it's close, and kind of make Leinster make mistakes, La Rochelle will win. But I'm going Leinster to win in what should be an absolute epic encounter. So I hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the history and battle between rugby's and club rugby's greatest rivalry of the modern era. Leinster La Rochelle. Let's do it all again.